we are running a very aggressive camshaft. It's LS3 ASA cam. It's GM's hot cam package, crate engine, 525 horsepower. Now, rock crawling and aggressive cams usually don't mix well together. So when we set this up for tuning and racing, we really, kind of dialed out that aggressive cam lope and chop at idle, just so it can perform not only at high speeds, but also low speeds. The plan is to activate a fun switch. That way, whenever we hit the switch at idle, this thing will just chop. There's really no performance benefits to it, but being able to turn that on and off is gonna be fantastic. One of the really cool things about Holley EFI software. I'm hoping to get this done and get the Jeep all cleaned up so we can take this to Cars and Coffee here in Oklahoma City tomorrow and really just show off this beautiful rig. So, gonna fire up the laptop, open the tuning software, and then we're also going to have to wire up a switch from the Holley ECU to activate our cool cam chop sound. Now on the Holley EFI computers, whether it's the HP or the Dominator, we get a ton of input and output options. And I've pretty much used all of them except for two, which are both ground activated inputs. Some of the other ones that we're running, it's like the radiator fan 1 and 2 automatically come on at a certain coolant temp. Our transmission cooler fan comes on at a certain trans temp, and our oil cooler comes on at a certain temp, and all of that is run with the Holley ECU. So what we're doing is gonna route this wire over to our switch panel, and it's a ground activated switch. So when we flip the switch, the computer knows to make the tuning changes that we're gonna program here in a bit, and it does what we want. Right now, our main power coming into all the switches is over here. So we're gonna have to move that over one, chop the bus bar so there's no power on the switch, it's only controlling the ground. I'm gonna go ahead and make these changes first and then route the wire and hook it on up. We have our wire going to our Holley, into the switch, out of the switch to a fuse, and back over to the original ground. So it's time to open up the software and start programming some changes in. So we're gonna open up our most recent tune file, go to input outputs, and we are going to name our new input, let's say idle chop. And we're going to enable it to ground, but we can go through all these. You gotta make sure that whatever you actually hook up to actually works. So now we need to go over to our pin map, where on number 3 input is our idle chop. We're gonna drag that. The black and white wire that I did was A13 input number 3. So that is now assigned. So we're gonna go to a 1D table and we're gonna enable our first table. Name it idle chop. And our table type is going to be a timing offset. So activation, we're gonna want it to be switched enable and advanced enable. So switched is when idle chop is enabled, so when we hit our switch, and when TPS, we're gonna keep it there, which is throttle position sensor, is below, let's say 2%. So it has to meet both of those requirements. Our switch has to be on and our throttle position sensor has to be below 2. So if we give it gas, it gets out of this table, as well as if our switch is off. None of this is happening. We're gonna go back, the x-axis needs to be RPM. So now we can go down to our table. It's set right in the middle what our target idle is. 950. On the bottom side, we're gonna go on the little bit of a low side. We're gonna say 500. And on the top side of it, we are gonna say maybe 1300. At 950, we're gonna leave it at 0, but everything else below that is going to be a positive, let's say 20. We're gonna go negative. So it's gonna create a timing oscillation to give us that chop where it's increasing timing, pulling timing, increasing timing, and pulling timing. It is about to get loud in here. We should be able to hit this and see what happens. Yeah. To make it even more aggressive, we're gonna do a second table when we hit the switch to bring the idle down some. got the Jeep loaded up. It is 7 o'clock in the morning. Figured we'd get here early. I've never been to one of these, but this is the 13th annual, so there's a chance that it's gonna be a little bit busy. So we are out here at Cars and Coffee with a couple Jeeps. And this guy, everybody's thinking that he got a wreck in my Jeep. So this is Heath with a beautiful JKU that is stacked right on there. So that is one great way to get attention, is to stack a Jeep in a parking lot full of cars, because they see it and just go crazy. Mike brought out the silver Jeep. This has been a project for about 9 years. Really cool CJ7. So he's actually running a really crazy steering system. It's a 4-link. It doesn't have a drag link. Steering box over to a pivot point, back to the frame, up here to another pivot point, down here, over to steering line. Well, that is a wrap for the first Coffee and Cars. I've been saying Cars and Coffee, but I guess it's Coffee and Cars now. So parking lot's pretty much empty. Very fun day. Met a lot of people out here. A lot of people checked out the Jeep, and definitely some really cool builds out here. So time to throw her on the trailer and head back home. Well, it's been a little over 2 weeks since we got back from Cars and Coffee, and we have Cassie's Jeep up here in the shop. So I had to run down to Texas, did 2 weeks with the Coast Guard. Now that we're back, I actually brought back some goodies for Cassie's Jeep. So we're running JK Rubicon axles on her LJ, and they've been fantastic. But while I was down there, scored this on Marketplace, a big brake upgrade kit for a JK, 200 bucks. These things are normally a lot more than that. I've went ahead and got the passenger side done. Everything went smooth. So here we have the factory JK stuff. It's not factory, this is actually the Power Stop kit, but this is our factory caliper, and we're moving over to a huge dual piston caliper. Much bigger overall. The pads are bigger, the caliper bracket itself is much bigger, and we get the extra volume with these dual pistons in there. Now on the rotor, we actually step up to a bigger sized rotor. I think this is close to 13, where the factory is like 11 3/4, maybe 12. So overall, all of the components are bigger, and big brake kits really aren't that new. There's a lot of them, but one thing people have been doing, which seems to be very cost effective and it just works, is swapping Gladiator brakes on JK axles. The fronts work, the rears work, and overall it's much better braking system. Now on JKs and LJs, whenever you put dual piston calipers in there, you're gonna have to upgrade your master cylinder to a bigger bore to actually help push the fluid in there. So on the LJs and TJs, we actually already swapped one of these on not too long ago. It's just a bigger bore, I think 1 1/8 or 1 1/16. I'll put information in the video description. The LJs and TJs, super easy. It's like 80 bucks for a new one. On a JK, you're probably gonna have to swap over to the J8 booster and master cylinder kit, which has been back ordered for a while, but there also is another master cylinder that offers a little more braking as well. So that's a lot of yapping. The brakes were decent before, but moving up to this dual piston, this thing should stop on a dime. So Let's pop the tire off and get these brakes on. So I'm not entirely sure what this kit is. The calipers themselves are from Teraflex and they bolt directly on, but I looked and Teraflex's kit comes with slotted rotors. So at some point, maybe they had this on for a while, swapped over to a standard Dodge Ram rotor. Such a drastic difference between the size of the calipers. These things should stop this lightweight Jeep on a dime. So it's time to bleed them, and that's all we really got to do to finish this up. But if you're by yourself, this is definitely a tool worth having. Got it at Harbor Freight. It's like 30 bucks, but it's a pneumatic bleeder kit. So I like to just leave this open for a minute to let it gravity feed. But pretty much what we're gonna do is just squeeze this, and it pneumatically just sucks the brake fluid out through the system. So easy one-handed operation to bleed the brakes. So one of the only downsides is that you really can't see the bubbles, but you can almost kind of feel it. And realistically, it's pulling it through. I'll just let it run down a little bit more. It should be good. Now, it's still nice sometimes to follow up with somebody pressing the pedal and putting some pressure behind it. With that being done, the other thing I want to knock out is very similar to what we started off the video with. So we're running Holley EFI on Cassies LJ as well, and I want to create like a manual lock for the transmission. So that way, when we're wheeling, if we want to keep it in a certain gear. So if we're in first gear, we hit the button and the trans stays in that gear. Kind of locks it into that gear, more of like a manual mode. So we're gonna do the same thing, very similar to this. We're gonna have a switch, activate a table in the Holley software and control the trans. So we're not using the overdrive button or the overdrive switch inside the LJ. And the ECU sends out power to this green and light blue wire traced down the schematics, and that's what illuminates that bulb. So whenever we hit that switch, it's going to send 12 volts to an input, the Holley, so it's gonna lock out that gear. So before we take it for a drive, I'm gonna wire that up, program it, and then take this thing out and see if it's actually working like it should. So far, the brakes feel so much better, and our manual shifter is working. I think we can rig up something really cool here. So, to enter manual mode, we hit our overdrive switch, and just to test it out, I wired up here. This is now our down switch. So we're in 4. If I hit the button, downshift to third, hit it again, downshifts to second. I'm gonna slow down some. Hit it again, downshifts to first. To get out of all that, just turn manual mode off. That is pretty cool. So if we had a second switch, we can wire that up as the upshift. Essentially, we can have paddle shifters on the Jeep, which would be pretty cool. And just like that, the LJ is good to go. Better brakes, 100% better. You can actually stop this thing now. The big push on the LJ to get this thing ready to go is because I'm actually taking this to Colorado and Utah here in 2 days. So I have a couple buddies from down in Texas. They're making the trip, and I figured I'd tag along and just have some fun wheeling out there. So we're gonna take the LJ, really just make sure this thing's good to go for wheeling. Cassie has a trip later on in the year scheduled with Discover 4x4 Adventures. It's like a ladies off-road day, and she's gonna be taking this. So really just wanna put it through its paces, make sure it's good to go. Plus the JK, that's not really going anywhere until we can get a new, pretty much new steering system on it, new pump, a better reservoir. That way we don't have to worry about this thing catching on fire again, because that was just a situation I don't want to burn the JK down, so it's not ready yet. So we're taking Cassie's LJ. It's been doing fantastic here in the past couple trips ever since we threw bead locks on it, a couple other changes. It's a very well performing LJ, so hopefully she'll do good. We're gonna strap her on the trailer over there and head out. So thanks for watching, guys. Like always, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully we'll see you next week with a video out on the trails in Colorado. So see you later.